My name is Dana Whitfield, and I'm 41 years old. The phone rang at 7:40 on a Tuesday morning while I was scraping burnt toast into the sink, and a woman from Crescent Auto Finance asked if I could confirm the down payment on my new pickup. I told her I hadn't bought a truck. She paused, then read me a VIN, a signed contract dated 9 days earlier, and a loan balance of $94,000 in my name. I laughed the way you laugh when your stomach drops. Then, she said the co-applicant's contact number, and I recognized it before she finished. It was my brother Marcus. I stood there with the toast knife in my hand and the water running. My daughter, Rennie, 17, called down the stairs asking if she'd missed the bus. I told her to get in the car. I don't remember driving her. I remember the bank woman's voice, careful and rehearsed, saying, "Ma'am, the first payment posts in 11 days. 11 days. That number stuck to me like a splinter I couldn't find. Here's the part I'm ashamed of. My first feeling wasn't rage. It was a tired, familiar dread, the kind you feel when the person who hurt you is someone you've already forgiven 100 times. And I want to ask you something, because I've turned it over every night since. When the person stealing from you is family, and everyone you love expects you to make it disappear quietly, what do you actually owe them? Let me back up, because you can't understand my hesitation without understanding Marcus. He's 3 years younger. Our mother raised us mostly alone after our father left, and then somewhere along the way I became the one who handled things. When Marcus wrecked his first car at 19, I paid the deductible. When he lost his apartment at 26, he slept on my couch for 5 months. I was the responsible one. And being the responsible one is a role you don't audition for. It gets assigned. And once it's yours, everyone stops noticing how much it costs you. Marcus had charm the way some people have money in a savings account. He could walk into a room and make everyone feel chosen. Our mother adored him. She used to say I was steady and he was special, and she meant it as a compliment to both of us, but I heard the ranking underneath. Steady is what you call the thing that holds still while the special thing gets to move. There were warning signs. 2 years ago he asked to use my address for mail forwarding because his was unreliable. I said fine. Last spring he asked me to co-sign a phone plan, and I said no, and he didn't speak to me for 6 weeks, then showed up at Rennie's birthday with a gift so extravagant I couldn't say anything about the silence without looking petty. That was Marcus. He didn't argue. He waited, and he made you the difficult one. So when the bank called, part of me already knew, not the truck specifically, but the shape of it, the way he could reach into my life and take something and still somehow arrive as the wounded party. I didn't call him that morning. I called the bank back after I dropped Rennie off, sitting in the school parking lot with the engine ticking. A man named Oscar in the fraud department took my information. He asked if I authorized the purchase. I said no. He asked if I knew the co-applicant. I hesitated and he heard it. "Ma'am," he said, "if you don't recognize this person, we open one kind of case. If you do recognize them, it's a different process and it can get complicated." He wasn't unkind. He was just telling me the truth I didn't want. Reporting fraud isn't a button, it's an accusation with a name on it. He told me what I'd need, a copy of the contract, a statement about what I did and didn't authorize, and, if the co-applicant was known to me, a decision I'd have to make and put in writing. Was this identity theft? Or a family loan gone wrong? Those two roads went in opposite directions, and only one of them ended with Marcus explaining himself to a judge. I asked Oscar to send me everything. He said the documents would come by email within the day, and that no payment obligation fell on me while the dispute was open, but he warned me the account was still active. If a payment missed while we sorted it out, it would report late. On my credit, not Marcus's. Mine, because my name and my social security number sat in the applicant field. That was the first thing that made this real, not the money. The idea that my name, the thing I'd spent 41 years keeping clean, was now attached to a debt I never agreed to, and the clock was running whether I acted or not. The contract arrived at 4:15. I read it in my kitchen with my coat still on. A charcoal gray heavy-duty pickup, fully loaded, purchased from a dealership 2 towns over. My name in the primary line, Marcus in the secondary, and the signature. I zoomed in on my phone until it blurred. It wasn't my signature, but it wasn't a bad copy either. Whoever wrote it had seen mine before. Marcus had seen mine 1,000 times. There was one more thing. The application listed an employer for me that I'd left 4 years ago, and an income figure higher than anything I'd ever made. Whoever filled this out had old information, and they'd padded it to qualify. That detail mattered more than I understood at the time. I called him that night. I sat on the edge of my bed with the door shut so Rennie wouldn't hear. He picked up on the second ring, cheerful. "Hey, stranger." Like nothing. I said, "The bank called me about a truck." Silence. Then smooth as water. "Okay, I was going to talk to you about that." "When?" "Dana, don't make it a whole thing. I'm making the payments. You won't be out a dime. I just needed the approval to go through. And my credit's a mess right now, you know that." I asked how he got my social security number. He said our mother had it. He said it like it was nothing, like reaching into her drawer for my most private number was a normal errand. He said, "It's not like I stole your identity. It's family. We share stuff. Marcus, you forged my signature. I signed for both of us because you'd have said yes eventually and I didn't have time. There's a job, landscaping contracts. I needed the truck to bid on them. This is me finally getting my life together, and you're treating me like a criminal." There it was. The reframe. He'd taken a felony and turned it into a self-improvement story, and somehow I was the one blocking his growth. I felt the old pull, the gravity of it. He'll pay it back. Don't ruin him over money you won't lose. Keep the peace. I told him I needed to think, and I hung up before he could make me feel guilty for needing to. I didn't sleep. Around 2 a.m, I did the thing I always do when I'm scared, which is math. $94,000. Payments of roughly $1,400 a month for 7 years. Marcus had never held a job longer than a year in his life. The landscaping contracts were, as far as I knew, a hope. If he missed even one payment, the late mark hit me, and I was 3 years into rebuilding my credit after my divorce, so I could someday buy a small place instead of renting. That plan lived on the same credit report he'd just borrowed against. The next morning I called our mother. I love her, and this is the part that still hurts to say. I told her what happened, and there was a long quiet, and then she said, "Oh, Dana, he's not thinking. But do you have to report it to the bank? Can't you two just work it out?" Just work it out. She'd handed him my social security number, and she was asking me to absorb the consequences quietly, the way I'd absorbed everything. I asked her if she understood that it was my credit on the line, my name on a loan I never signed. She said, "I know, sweetheart, but he's your brother. If you turn him in, that follows him forever." And what followed me? I didn't say it. I've never been able to say it to her. That's the trap I was in. And I want to be honest that I nearly stayed in it. I nearly called Oscar back and said it was a misunderstanding, a family loan, no fraud, please close the case. That's the ending my mother wanted, and the ending Marcus assumed was coming because it was the ending that always came. What stopped me was Rennie. She came into the kitchen that night while I was staring at the contract for the 100th time, and she read it over my shoulder before I could turn it over. She's 17 and sharper than I give her credit for. She said, "That's Uncle Marcus's number as the co-buyer." Then she looked at me and said, "Mom, if a stranger did this, you'd call the police in 5 minutes. Why is it different because it's him?" I didn't have an answer. I'd been asking myself a smaller version of that question my whole life and calling the silence love. The next day I went to see a lawyer. I almost didn't, because a consultation cost money I'd rather not spend, but I found a woman named Priya Anand who did a free 30-minute first meeting for consumer issues. I sat in her office and laid it all out. She listened without expression, which I appreciated, and then she told me the things I didn't want to hear. First, the good part. She said that in a genuine identity theft case, I had strong protections. I could file a report, submit a fraud affidavit to the lender, and dispute the account with the credit bureaus, and the law generally required the lender to investigate and, if fraud was confirmed, remove my liability. She said the padded income and the old employer on the application actually helped me because they showed the applicant didn't have my current information in front of them, which was consistent with someone filling it out without me. Then the hard part. She said, "But you told your brother you needed to think about it. And you called your mother instead of the police, and you know the co-applicant personally. The lender is going to look at all of that." She explained that lenders and prosecutors treat family cases differently, that they're wary of people using a fraud claim as a weapon in a personal dispute, or filing fraud and then quietly accepting payments, which can look like you ratified the loan after the fact. She said the single most dangerous thing I could do was take any money from Marcus toward those payments, because the day I accepted a payment, I'd blurred the line between victim and lender, and that blur could sink the whole claim. "What it proves," she said, tapping the contract, "is that someone put your name on this. What it doesn't prove by itself is that it wasn't you, or that you didn't know. Your credibility is the case. So from this moment you have to act exactly like what you are, a person who did not agree to this." I asked her the question that scared me most. If I filed, could Marcus go to prison? She was careful. She said it wasn't up to me. If the lender confirmed fraud, they could refer it to law enforcement, and prosecutors would decide whether to charge. Sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't, especially in family cases where restitution was possible. But she was clear about one thing. You can't file a false report, and you can't withdraw a true one just because it becomes inconvenient. Once you tell the bank this was fraud, that's a sworn statement. You need to be sure you can live with the truth, because the truth is what you're signing. I drove home understanding, for the first time, that there was no quiet version of this. There was only the truth or a lie, and both had a price. I decided to give Marcus one chance to make it not be fraud. Not for his sake, or maybe partly for his sake, I don't fully know. I asked him to meet me. I told him to bring the truck. He came to my place on a Saturday, and the truck was even bigger in person than in the photos. Gleaming charcoal chrome everywhere, sitting in my driveway like a monument to bad decisions. He hopped down from the cab, grinning, and actually said, "You want to see the inside? It's got the cooled seats." I said, "Marcus, here's what has to happen. You take this back to the dealer and unwind the loan, or you refinance it into your own name and get mine off it completely. That's the only way this doesn't become a fraud case." His face changed. The charm folded up, and something harder came out. "I can't refinance. My credit won't carry it. You know that. That's the whole point of why I used yours." "Then return it." "I already put $4,000 down. I don't get that back. And I've got a bid due Monday that needs this truck." He stepped closer. "Dana, you're seriously going to blow up my one shot over paperwork after everything I've done for this family?" I honestly couldn't think of a single thing he'd done for the family that wasn't a story he told about himself. But I didn't say that. I said, "You forged my name." He said the thing I'll never forget. He said, "You've got good credit because you've got a boring life. I'm just borrowing a little of the boring." He smiled when he said it, like it was a joke we were both in on. I told him I was filing with the bank on Monday. He got in the truck and left without another word, and the cooled seats and the chrome caught the sun as he pulled away. That should have been the moment I felt strong. Instead, I sat on my front step and cried, because I understood that I was about to become, in my mother's eyes, and probably in Marcus's forever, the person who destroyed him. And a part of me still believed that was my job to prevent. Monday, I filed. I completed the fraud affidavit, submitted the police report I'd been told to file first, and sent everything to Crescent Auto Finance's fraud unit. Oscar wasn't handling it anymore. It went to an investigator named Ruth Callahan. She was thorough and slow, and both of those things terrified me. For 3 weeks, nothing felt like it was working. This is the part the stories never tell you. Filing the report didn't lift the weight, and it just moved it. The account stayed open during the investigation. Ruth told me the lender would review the signature, the application, the dealership's records, and critically would want a statement from the co-applicant, meaning Marcus would get his chance to tell them his version. And Marcus, it turned out, had a version. Ruth called me on a Thursday, and her tone was different, more guarded. She said, "I need to ask you some things. Your brother says you agreed to this. He says you knew about the truck, that you'd verbally approved it, and that you only reported fraud after the two of you had a personal falling out." She paused. "He also provided text messages." My blood went cold. Ruth read one to me. It was a text I'd sent Marcus 4 months earlier, before any of this, when he'd been talking vaguely about needing a work vehicle. I'd written, "If it helps you get steady work, I'm all for it." Out of context, sent to an investigator, it looked like approval. There it was, the setback I hadn't seen coming. My own words, my own kindness weaponized. I'd spent my whole life being supportive of Marcus in 100 small ways, and now every one of those messages was ammunition. Ruth wasn't accusing me, but she was doing her job, which meant she now had 2 people telling opposite stories and a text that leaned his way. I got off the phone shaking. I called Priya. She was calm in a way that steadied me. She said, "This is exactly what I warned you about, and it's survivable, but you have to be precise now." She told me the text about steady work wasn't approval to put my name on a $94,000 loan, and any reasonable person could see the difference between encouraging someone to find work and consenting to be a co-borrower on a specific contract I never saw. But she also said Marcus's counterattack was smart, because it turned the case from, "Did someone forge her name?" into, "He said, she said between siblings," which is exactly the Merck lenders hate. She asked me the question that changed everything. "The application," she said. "You told me it listed an old employer and an inflated income. Where did those numbers come from?" I didn't know, and then I did. The old employer was one I'd left 4 years ago. The inflated income was close to a number from an old pay stub. 4 years ago, Marcus had lived on my couch for 5 months. 4 years ago, I'd been organizing my papers for my divorce, and I'd had folders of financial documents spread across the dining table for weeks. The application wasn't built from information our mother gave him. It was built from documents he'd seen when he lived in my home. Priya said if we could show the application data-matched documents from 4 years ago rather than anything current, it strengthened the story that this was assembled without me, because I'd never have given him 4-year-old numbers for a loan today. But proving it meant I had to find those old documents, and I wasn't even sure I still had them. I spent an entire weekend in my storage closet with Rennie, going through boxes I hadn't opened since the move. And here's the honest, uncinematic truth. We almost didn't find it. I'd nearly thrown those divorce folders out twice. But in the bottom of a banker's box, under Rennie's old report cards, was the folder with the pay stub, the employer name, the income figure, both matching the loan application almost exactly, both 4 years out of date. Rennie held the stub up next to the loan application on my phone and looked at me. She said, "He just copied what he could find." Then, quieter, "He was in our house." That's the detail that stayed with me, not the money. The idea that 4 years ago, while I fed him and let him sleep on my couch and thought I was helping my little brother get back on his feet, he had been reading my private papers. The help I gave him had been the raw material for the thing he did to me. Care and exploitation, sitting in the same folder. I sent Ruth the old pay stub with a dated explanation. I explained, in writing and without exaggeration, exactly what the steady work text meant and when I'd sent it. I made no accusations I couldn't support. I didn't call Marcus a monster. I just laid the pieces side by side and let them speak. An application built from 4-year-old documents, an income I hadn't earned in years, an employer I hadn't worked for since before the divorce, and a signature that resembled mine closely enough to suggest someone had studied it. Then I did the hardest thing. I went to see my mother. And I told her I was not going to drop it, and I told her why. I showed her the pay stub and the application side by side on the kitchen table where she'd raised us both. I watched her understand it. Not all at once. First, she said he must have found the papers by accident. Then she went quiet. Then she said something I didn't expect. She said, "I gave him your number for the phone plan last year. I didn't give it to him for this." Her hands were flat on the table. I've been telling myself he only did a small wrong thing, but he used what I gave him, and then he used what he took from you, and he let me believe I was the one who caused it. That was the first time in my life my mother chose the truth over the story about Marcus being special. It cost her something. I saw it cost her. The investigation took 2 more months. I want to be clear about what didn't happen, because I keep expecting these things to have clean endings and they don't. Marcus was not dragged away in handcuffs. There was no dramatic confrontation where he broke down. What happened was slower and, in its way, heavier. Ruth's investigation, combined with the old documents and the mismatched signature analysis the lender ran, concluded that the account was not opened with my authorization. Crescent Auto Finance removed my liability and closed the fraudulent account against my name. The credit bureaus, after I disputed it with the fraud affidavit and police report, removed the account from my report. That was the practical victory, and it was the one that actually mattered to me. My name was clean again. My future was mine again. The truck was repossessed. Marcus lost the $4,000 he'd put down, and he lost the truck he'd never really been able to afford. The lender referred the matter to the district attorney's office, which is not the same as charges being filed, and I was told these referrals in family cases often end in a diversion arrangement with restitution rather than a trial, especially for a first offense. I don't fully know how his part ended, and I made a decision not to steer it. I gave truthful statements when asked, and I stopped trying to control the outcome, because trying to control Marcus's consequences was just the old job in a new costume. Here's what I paid for it. Marcus doesn't speak to me, neither do 2 of our cousins, who heard his version first and decided I was the sister who put her own brother in front of prosecutors over money I never even lost. I've stopped explaining myself to them. That silence is a real loss. I grew up with those cousins, and holidays are smaller now. My mother and I are okay, better than okay in a strange way, because we finally told each other the truth once. But she grieves her son, and I can't fix that grief. And some evenings I feel it in her voice on the phone. And I grieve too, not the truck, not the money. I grieve the brother I kept inventing. For 20 years I believed that if I just held steady enough, gave enough, forgave enough, Marcus would finally become the person I kept covering for. The truck taught me he was already exactly who he was, and my helping was never going to change that. It was only ever going to fund it. The last time I saw the contract, I didn't put it back in the drawer. I keep it in a folder now, in the same box where I found that 4-year-old pay stub. 2 documents that Marcus built the same crime out of sitting together. I keep them not out of anger but as a reminder of the exact moment I stopped confusing being needed with being loved. That number the bankwoman gave me on the first morning, 11 days until the first payment posted, still means something to me. I used to think a crisis was a thing that happened to me while I waited for someone else to fix it. 11 days was the first time I understood the clock was mine, and so was the choice. Rennie asked me weeks after it was over whether I regretted it, whether it was worth losing part of the family to keep my name clean. I told her the truth, which is that I don't think of it as losing part of the family. I think of it as finding out which part of the family only existed as long as I kept paying for it. She said, "That's kind of sad, Mom." It is. But there's a version of me that would have paid $94,000, or $194,000, in installments of guilt and silence for the rest of my life, just to keep everyone comfortable and keep calling that love. I'm not her anymore. I picked up the phone when the bank called, and I told the truth. And I kept telling it even when the truth cost me the people who'd only loved the quiet version of me. So let me leave you with the question that's followed me since that Tuesday morning at the sink. The one I still don't have a comfortable answer for. If protecting the people you love means letting them keep taking pieces of you, and telling the truth means losing them, then which one was really the family all along?